This is your 91.3 FM 3030 Sports Update. The Miami Heat defeated the Indiana Pacers 90-79 in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals, taking a 3-2 series lead. LeBron James scored 30 points, including 16 in the third quarter, and credited a halftime speech for the Heat's turnaround.
Juwan's voice in our locker room on the floor is as big as anyone. Big as Spurs, big as mine, D-Wade, UD, and that's why we brought him back. He got on us at halftime to let us know how we weren't connected as a team, we weren't playing as a team, and we was wasting an opportunity.
Game 6 of the Heat Pacers will take place in Indiana on Saturday. In league news, the Sacramento Kings named Golden State Warriors assistant Mike Malone their new head coach. Malone agreed to a 4-year deal, replacing Keith Smart, who had 1 year left on his deal. The Los Angeles Clippers, meanwhile, are still looking for a head coach, and reports say they've contacted Jeff Van Gundy, Byron Scott, and Elvin Gentry. In the NHL, no games scheduled for tonight, but both conference finals will begin on Saturday. It's the Kings vs. Blackhawks in the West, and the Bruins vs. the Penguins in the East. In the MLB, the Dodgers placed Matt Kemp on the DL, the Yankees will activate Andy Pettitte off the DL on Monday, and the Royals named George Brett their new hitting coach. I'm AJ Speier, and this has been your 3030 Sports Update on 91.3 FM WBNY.
And now, the Sports Reporters Radio Show on WBNY.
Here comes Augustine. Meanwhile, Hansbrough and Anderson get involved. The shove by Anderson, Frank Vogel quickly out of the floor to keep Hansbrough away. Pick and roll defensive plays by Miami. Hasn't set the pick, and James able to drill it. James for three. But LeBron is in one of those streaks.
I was just in attack mode in the third quarter. Looked for my shot, and luckily I was able to make some.
That was the Miami Heat recap of the game, Game 5 last night. The Miami Heat winning 90-79 over the Indiana Pacers. Birdman was the first call there. If you remember, Aubrey, there was that incident between him and Psycho T. I found it kind of interesting that people were really mad on Twitter that they didn't throw him out of the game. And you look at what happened to the Nazir Muhammad incident with him and LeBron James in Game 3 of the other series. You look over at what happened there. They ended up throwing out Nazir Muhammad because LeBron James flopped. Obviously, Tyler Hansbrough didn't flop in this instance. And you feel like if Hansbrough had flopped, that maybe they might have thrown out Birdman?
I don't think so personally, simply because of the fact that I feel like you're talking about two players who, while are contributors, they're not game changers, at the magnitude of a LeBron James. I'm sure if Tyler Hansbrough would have pushed LeBron, he probably would have been kicked out of the game. I feel like the Nazir Muhammad LeBron was a little bit more malicious than the Chris Anderson with Tyler Hansbrough. I think the Hansbrough and Anderson was just like a little scuffle. I feel as though the Muhammad situation, it was a situation where he's not a guy that the Bulls depended on, and it was a situation where he did commit a hard foul on LeBron. LeBron reacted with the elbow, and I don't think the push was as big as LeBron made it, but at the end of the day, he did get up and purposely push him. I think the Anderson thing was like a little of a nudge. I actually liked it. Because I'm a type of fan. I'm like Magic Johnson says on ABC, like, I like to see rivalries and guys hate each other. I don't like this buddy, slap each other up at the end of the game stuff, because it makes it more competitive and it makes it more fun when two teams hate each other. When Miami and Chicago play, they hate each other. And that's what makes it even more intense than the actual game it is. So I didn't have a problem with it personally. I mean, they both got personal fouls. I think it was a technical foul on Birdman because he initiated the contact. But personally, I didn't have a problem with it.
The whole play started because Mario Chalmers got fouled to the floor. I believe there was no call for that. They ended up bringing the basketball down the court, and then Anderson decided to go and push Tyler Hansbrough, but he ended up landing right into Roy Hibbert's arms, who was like right behind him. I believe if he hadn't been there, that Hansbrough might have actually flown across the court a little bit. But you look over what happened with the incident between the Bulls and the Heat. LeBron James slid from the three-point line to the free throw line, and it was pretty blatant that he had gotten it was a severe push on LeBron James. And you look over at this incident, obviously Hibbert being right behind him, I believe that's why they ended up making it a double technical. Although I didn't really see what Hansbrough really did besides chest bump him. before the push. So I don't understand why Birdman was still in the game. But you look at, as you mentioned, back in the 90s, people would throw punches, and that's how they were thrown out of games. This isn't really anything severe. It's not like when Ron Artest went into the crowd and tried to get in that fight with that fan. So when I look at this matchup, I mean, the series is getting better and better each game. Game 6 will be interesting because it's going to be in Indiana, so you figure Indiana's probably going to win this one. But what I really liked is that LeBron James stepped up in the second half with 16 points in the third quarter. I believe he had something to do with the 25 of the team's 30 points in that half. But LeBron James outscored Indiana that entire quarter, 16-13.
Yeah, it was a dominant quarter after halftime. You had to really expect that from the Miami Heat because they came out, honestly, and let's be honest, they really walked through the first half. They didn't look like a team that was urgent. They didn't look like a team that was playing like the series was tied. They were playing like a team that just came back from training camp off the offseason. They looked horrible. I thought Indiana really came out strong. I think, honestly, they've come out strong every game besides Game 3. I thought they came out strong last night. I think Paul George came out and really established himself early, something that he did not do in Games 3 and 4. Roy Hibbert established himself like he's had the whole series. But besides LeBron, a guy that stepped up for Miami because of the fact that Dwayne Wade obviously is clearly not 100%, not even close, and Bosh is, I don't even know. I can't even explain Bosh's performance. Udonis Haslem, I mean, I think he went 8 of 9 last night, and then he also went 8 of 10 the game before that. So he's really, they're leaving him open. They're letting him beat them, and he's beating them. It's plain and simple. He's hitting his mid-range jump shot. He got tangled up there last night. I seen with David West. I thought that gave Miami a little, urgency as well. Gave him a little push, and I think that those two incidents between Birdman and Tyler Hansbrough and Udonis Haslem and David West really sparked Miami, besides the fact that LeBron had that little pep talk as well at halftime. So I think it's other pieces stepping up around LeBron is the reason why they won last night, and they're going to need that again in Game 6 or Game 7 if it goes that far.
I believe Birdman hasn't missed a shot yet, and I believe he actually took a longer jump shot rather than the 2 feet jumpers.
He did.
Taking in this one, but Udonis Haslem had a big performance. He was 8 of 9 from the field. You mentioned him. They mentioned Juwan Howard as the guy who's the reason for why they had such a strong second half. He had a big speech during halftime, as you heard LeBron James talking about during my sports update. So you look at what happened there at Miami. I mean, they have plenty of leadership. The question is now, are they still the big three, though? Or is it now just LeBron James' team with a little better cast than he had in Cleveland? Or is it still the big three? It's just a matter of injuries, because Chris Bosh has the player option, so he could always opt out of his contract next year. It's not going to happen, obviously. If you're making $15 million, why would you? Dwayne Wade, with injury, you know what he's capable of when he's healthy, but he hasn't been healthy in a while.
Yeah, as of right now, it's not a big three. I mean, in the games they've lost, it's looked like LeBron is back in Cleveland again. Let's be honest here. I mean, he's even came out and made comments towards Cleveland in post-game remarks, and that can't be good, right?
Especially in this Game 5, he came out and talked about it.
Yes, can't be good. He really hasn't had that much support from Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade in this series particularly. I think Dwayne Wade is averaging 14.7 points for the playoffs, which is a career low for him. He's clearly not healthy. It's the ankle. His knee is the same knee is bothering him from last season. He's not really getting any elevation. He never really was a jump shooter to begin with, so his game is really pretty much taken away when he can't drive to the hole like he used to. Chris Bosh, I really feel as though has been outplayed. I mean, the front court of Indiana is a big front court, so it's really taken away from him. He really can't establish himself down low with Roy Hibbert just sitting there in the paint. So he's been trying to get his three-point shot going. But and so is LeBron, and I feel as though LeBron needs to post up more. I really feel as though that is the answer. He posted up in Game 3. They dominated Indiana in that game. And it just blows my mind how he can post up one game and then just go right back to the jump shoot in the next game. It just boggles my mind that a guy at 6'8", 250 does not post up every single play, because, I mean, who can honestly stick with him down low in the post with his size, his agility, quickness, all that, and weight? Paul George is probably one of the only guys in the league that can do it, and he couldn't even handle LeBron James down low in the post. He's just too small. Nobody's 250 at 6'8".
Well, that was the thing the Knicks wanted to do with Carmelo Anthony when they put him in the 4 position. They wanted to put him up against power forwards who were slower and couldn't match his athletic ability. So you see the Miami Heat sort of doing that, but he's playing more small forward than he is power forward. I believe they put him at the 4 position. I want to see how he'd match up with David West, but going against Roy Hibbert in the paint, 7'2" center, there is kind of tough to get around him. But if you can get him in foul trouble, which we've seen him do sometimes throughout this postseason, I believe LeBron James can be successful. But I mean, the key for this game, from what I've seen so far from Indiana, it's basically been just 3 players for them. I mean, you look at the score; they had 79 points. Their big 3 had 66 points of that 79, so they really didn't have anybody else on this team coming through. Actually, a more interesting stat was at the third quarter, they had 50 points, those big 3, and they just had 57 as a team. So there was only 7 other points that were obtained in those 3 quarters by their teammates.
Yeah, this team is very dependent and relied on their front court the whole season. Paul George, David West, Roy Hibbert. Roy Hibbert has been dominant in the series. I mean, Miami has no answer for Roy Hibbert. He's getting double doubles like it's no tomorrow. I mean, he's getting 20 points, 13 rebounds, 4 or 5 blocks. Paul George has been very inconsistent in this series. I thought in game 1 and game 2 he really put himself where people were saying, including myself, that he's reached that superstar status. But then he comes out in game 3 and game 4 in Indiana, really, with a chance to really put Miami down when all you do is win all your home games and you're good. And he really didn't step up. He wasn't aggressive enough. And then in game 5 yesterday, he came out shooting and really took it to LeBron James. Obviously, he couldn't sustain it over the whole period of the game, but I thought he came out and really played well. David West is a force down low, but they need some production from the point guard position. We're talking about George Hill, a guy who I don't really think is a true point guard to begin with. I think he was a guy that just took advantage of a matchup versus Raymond Felton in the series before. I don't think he's an elite point guard or even a top 10 point guard. DJ Augustine is a guy off the bench who's not really a point guard as well, a guy who likes to score, doesn't get many assists. I think he had 1 or 2 assists in the game he did start versus the Knicks last series when Hill was out with that concussion. So,
well, he had a big game 1 off the bench, but, I mean, as we've been talking about, they really don't have a bench. I mean, they have Tyler Hansbrough, Sam Young, Ian Mahimi, and DJ Augustine. They're only 4 players who come off the bench.
No offensive threat.
They had just 8 points from their bench players in the last game, and you already mentioned Stevenson and George Hill. They really haven't stepped up. You look at what worked for Indiana in the series against the Knicks. Obviously, they had the low post players with West and Hibbert, but they could also get the 3-point shooters involved. George was hitting threes. Stevenson came up big when he had to. Even George Hill. They're not having that same success against Miami. Obviously, you're facing Dwayne Wade. You're facing LeBron James. So it's going to be a little tougher in that category. But I'm just kind of surprised. It's just been those 3. I mean, their big 3 has outplayed Miami's big 3, but Miami's still finding a way to win games through LeBron James. It's basically been LeBron James versus Indiana.
Yeah, and that's honestly the key. I think the big key, you said that Indiana before the series had their 3-point shooters involved. I think it's simply the fact that they're just not double teaming. The Knicks double teamed Roy Hibbert and David West on the catch, and they made it so much easier to pass out double teams and move the ball. Miami's not double teaming. They're letting Roy Hibbert score at will, and they're letting David West score at will, but they realize that that's not enough to beat them if you let 2 guys down low beat you. Because they're a team, Miami's a team that on defense forces you to take tough 2-point shots. So Roy Hibbert has hit a lot of tough 2-point shots, and they'll take that, but they're not going to give you open shots because they're too athletic. They recover too easily on defense, and they can make up for space easily. And pretty much when LeBron James is not on Paul George, it allows him to roam the court more because whoever he's checking, he's not as worried about. So I feel like they're going to need some production in Indiana from their guards if they have any chance of getting this game back to Miami. If you look at game 4, for instance, Lance Stevenson had a big game in that game. I think he had 20 points in that game. I think George only had like 10 or 12. So, I mean, you see what a big difference is when they can get Lance Stevenson or George Hill to get at least 15, 20 points to go along with George's 20, West 20, and Hibbert's 20. That makes a big difference when you can at least get double digits out of at least one of your guards. You need to get at least double digits from one of them.
The one big problem with Indiana, I mean, obviously they haven't had an offense all season, but they've also had a lot of turnovers. They had 17 in this game. You're not going to win the game when you turn the ball over, especially against a team that likes to transition and do fast breaks like Miami does. So you have LeBron James. I mean, you have Dwayne Wade. Obviously, he only had 10 points in this game. But Mario Chalmers has really been stepping up. He's been cutting to the hole a little bit more. He's been finding more openings because, obviously, the defense for Indiana is focused on stopping LeBron James. So Mario Chalmers can drive to the lane. He can hit threes. He's been doing a lot better lately. So it's going to be interesting to see what Indiana comes out with for a defensive strategy in Game 6. As you mentioned, LeBron James, he's going to get at least 25 every single night. It's just a matter of can you stop him when it comes to passing the ball around to his teammates. Really haven't seen much from Ray Allen yet, or Shane Battier, or even Norris Cole too much in the series yet. And those guys had crucial roles in the series prior to this one. So it'll be interesting to see what happens against Indiana here. But it's clear. The strategy for them is to go to Hibbert, West, and Paul George. And interestingly enough, West didn't really get established until the second half.
Yeah, and that's the key is that they don't, when they do get production from their front court, both of them aren't dominating at the same time. When Hibbert's dominating, then West takes the back seat, or if West is being aggressive, then Hibbert is being not as aggressive. I think they need to look to get the ball to Hibbert even more. I mean, I think he should be shooting the ball at least 20 times a game, personally, because of the fact that when he gets the ball, there's nobody that can block his shot, and he's so deep in the paint, he causes mismatch problems because, I think Miami adjusted and even has gone to a bigger lineup now with Udonis Haslem in the starting lineup at the center virtually, and Chris Bosh at the power forward, and it's due simply to the size of Indiana because you can't play small versus Indiana. The only way you can play small versus Indiana is if you're hitting all your jump shots, because if you miss your jump shot, they're most likely going to get the rebound because Roy Hibbert at 7'2" is going to snag 15 rebounds a game. You have David West down there, Paul George. They collapse the offensive and defensive boards. So they obviously need them to dominate again tomorrow night, and they also need George Hill or Lance Stevenson to dominate, or DJ Augustine. One of those three has to score 15 to 20 points, if not all three of them, to get back to Miami, because I feel as though Miami has their confidence back now, and they're ready to close it out.
The thing with Indiana is they play so well at home, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I believe Miami only has one loss on the road this postseason as well. I believe their other losses came at home. But, yeah, the clear X factor in this series has been Udonis Haslem, because when he's gone off, the Miami Heat have won. They won Game 3, they won Game 5 because of it. And this one, as I mentioned, he was 8 for 9 from the field. It's that baseline jumper. When you have LeBron James driving in the lane and you have Hibbert and West looking at him, he's going to dish it off. And as you see, Udonis Haslem makes the shot, and it just gives him another weapon that you weren't really expecting. Because let's face it, all the weapons they have on this Miami team, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, LeBron James, Mario Chalmers, are you really worried about Udonis Haslem and Chris Anderson?
Obviously not, yeah.
So when you can get other players who are just regular role players there for more defensive purposes, and they're getting involved with scoring, then you're in a lot of trouble for Indiana. And going back to Indiana now, I don't want to just rule Indiana out just yet because they play so well at home, and they're not just going to roll over and play dead here. But I got a feeling Miami's going to win this, and it'll come down to the wire in Game 6.
Yeah, I mean, I picked Miami in 6 originally. I'm not going to go away from my pick now. I thought they would at least get 2 games. They got 2 games, and I think Miami's just ready to close it out. I mean, if you really look at Miami when their backs are against the wall in the past, they've come up big. They came back up big last year in the Eastern Conference Finals in Game 6 versus the Boston Celtics when LeBron had a historic night. They might not even made it to the finals if, Boston came out and played hard in that game. They were down 3-2 in that series. They were down last year, same thing with Indiana. They were down 2-1, came back with backs against the wall, and LeBron James and Dwayne Wade had historic games as well. So I don't see it being any differently. I don't see a big difference happening from yesterday to tomorrow. So I look for it to be a close game, definitely. I wouldn't be surprised either way. If Indiana wins, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think that, I think Miami really is going to go in there and really look to close this out and not stretch this series any longer and give the Spurs any more time to rest.
I just feel like there's a lot of hype around Indiana after they beat the Knicks, but a lot of people didn't understand that the Knicks really weren't a team who likes to play defense. And they were a team who basically relied on Carmelo Anthony. And obviously the difference between Miami and the New York Knicks is that you have a distributor in LeBron James who does not always have to take all the shots. He's not going to lead the league in NBA for taking shots. But that third quarter was really interesting to me because 7 of 10 from the field, 16 points. You look at the Pacers, they were 3 of 14 as a team from the field. And just going forward, I mean, it just shows you how great of a coach Eric Spoelstra is. That halftime adjustment he made. Obviously, the speech helped from Juwan Howard and then LeBron James, who we saw on TV, also reiterating what he had said. But yeah, I really like Miami's chances going forward. And then, assuming they win Game 6, they're going to go on to the NBA Finals to take on the San Antonio Spurs. And we're going to have a guest from ProjectSpurs.com, Michael DeLeon. He'll be coming on to talk about the San Antonio Spurs and their success. Small market team who finds success. If only Buffalo had that kind of success.
It would be nice.
It would. Because, the Buffalo Bills and the Sabres, they find excuse after excuse not to win games. Obviously, there's less players to worry about, and they had a great strategy drafting. They ended up getting Tim Duncan with the first overall pick. They had David Robinson a while back from the first overall pick. So they were just in the right situation at the right time. And for some reason, the Bills, they always seem to do 6-10, 7-9. Never good enough to get that top 5 pick. And when they did have a top 5 pick, you see people like Mike Williams get drafted.
Yeah, it comes down to the scouting department to really evaluate players in their transition from the college ranks to the pros. The Spurs have made a lot of great moves in the past. They've actually stuck with the players. While a lot of teams, I'm sure there would be a lot of organizations and GMs and coaches that would have broken up this Spurs team a long time ago. Obviously, Tim Duncan, I think he's like 36, 37, 17 years in the league.
37 years old.
Yeah, so obviously, and he's still dominant. I think he's better than he was years ago. You have Ginobili, who is also in his 30s. He's in his last year of his contract this year. Tony Parker is not as old. People don't realize that he's been in the league for quite a bit of time, but I think he's 29. He's been in the league since he was, I think, like 18, 19 years old. So you're talking about that's another big three that people don't talk about because it's not as high profile as other
small market, yeah.
A small market, but that's a big three. And then you can obviously add big four with I think Greg Popovich, who's the best, if not the second best coach in the NBA. Doc Rivers, I think, should be up there as well. So there's a well-coached team. They're really the definition of a team in the NBA. They don't have a dominant superstar like a LeBron James, but they have a bunch of good players. I think Tim Duncan obviously is going to go down as if second or not one of the best power forwards to ever play the game. Still dominant at his age. He's still getting double-doubles. Tony Parker will go down. I think
he's the best point guard.
Yeah, definitely one of the most underrated point guards in the NBA because people, like you said, a small market.
Well, the thing with Tony Parker is when he first came to the league, he was 21 years old. He won his first championship. He had established players like Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili on the team. But the thing is, as he's gotten older, and so have Ginobili and Duncan, he's had to take more of a scoring type of role. So you see one night he'll put up somewhere like 20 assists, and then the next night he'll have 37 points. It's a matter of what the defense gives him. And the thing is with Tony Parker, he never really takes a bad shot.
Yeah, and also he doesn't turn the ball over much. And you're asking about the point guard position. That is the two key things: is to set up the offense, get a good shot, and not turn the ball over. And in these playoffs, I think it's funny now that people are just realizing him now, 3 rings later, but I'm just glad he's getting the recognition he deserves because I've always said that Tony Parker was a top 5 point guard.
Well, we've been spoiled with point guard playing in the NBA. Let's face it. You've had Chris Paul, Deron Williams, Steve Nash, all those great point guards. So
Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, Russell Westbrook. So you really don't think too much about Tony Parker because of all the point guard play we've seen. There's even Brandon Jennings who we don't even talk about, who he might not even be back in Milwaukee, by the way.
Oh, he's gone. He's done.
Well, he's a restricted free agent, so they have the option to match whoever wants to sign him, but you never know.
He must go to a bigger market. I don't see why he would stay in Milwaukee. There's nothing in Milwaukee to really stay for. They're not a contending team or anything.
They don't have the pieces yet. They don't even have a coach, I believe. They're looking at Larry Drew, by the way, who was fired, or not fired. His contract ended in Atlanta, and they ended up going with the San Antonio Spurs assistant coach. But you look over at the San Antonio Spurs, and they're a team who actually had George Hill at one point, and they ended up trading him to get the 13th overall pick, and they ended up taking Kawhi Leonard with that pick. So they have a great scouting department, and they know which players can play, which players can't, and they get rid of them. Someone like Corey Joseph stepped in and filled in admirably while Tony Parker was injured. So they do a great job with their scouting department, and I hope obviously the Bills and the Sabres, it's a different sport, so they can't really look at the model too much for them because obviously it's different. But scouting department and great coaching and just finding players who are loyal and want to stay with the franchise and are willing to take a discount a little bit is what the Sabres and Bills need to do going forward. But I like what I've seen from the San Antonio Spurs. They're 4-0 all-time when it comes to NBA Finals. Tim Duncan's been there for all 4 of them. But you had Parker and Ginobili who came later, and they've been there. This will be the 4th time that they're all in the same NBA Finals together, and hopefully they'll win it. As I mentioned, we're going to have Michael DeLeon from ProjectSpurs.com coming on our show. For now, we're going to go to break. When we come back, he'll be calling in.
Come and join DJ Star every Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m., playing your favorite jams in R&B, hip-hop, and gospel music. Catch DJ Star only on 91.3 FM, WBNY.
Sports Replay, located on 1614 Niagara Falls Boulevard in Tonawanda, buys, sells, and repairs new and used sporting goods since 1999. They specialize in hockey, snowboards, skiing, paintball, airsoft, and much, much more. Call in at 716-834-6595. Also on Facebook. Once again, Sports Replay at 1614 Niagara Falls Boulevard, a quarter mile off the 290.
Here you are, Polly, my latest culinary creation.
These fish fillets look wonderful.
They are. I just used a small amount of a vegetable oil that's low in saturated fat.
Does that matter?
It does. Oils like canola, corn, and olive mainly contain monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and they can help reduce bad cholesterol in your blood and lower your risk of heart disease and stroke.
How do you know?
The American Heart Association told me at heart.org/facethefats.
Canola Info proudly supports the American Heart Association's Face the Fats campaign.
This is your 91.3 FM 3030 Sports Update. After practicing on a limited basis, wide receiver Stevie Johnson was a full participant in the last week of OTAs. Joining him was right tackle Eric Pierce, who was still recovering from groin surgery last season. Absent from the field, however, was defensive tackle Kyle Williams, who says he plans to be ready for starter training camp. As for the QB competition, Kevin Kolb and Tavares Jackson split first-team reps in 11-11 drills, with rookie E.J. Manuel getting the third-team reps. As for the running back debate, head coach Doug Marrone says he doesn't plan on limiting his two-star running backs C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson. After months of speculation, the New England Patriots confirmed that tight end Rob Gronkowski will indeed need back surgery after an MRI. Gronkowski's recovery time is uncertain at the moment, making his status unknown for the start of training camp and the regular season. In the NHL, tomorrow will be the start of the Western Conference Finals as the Chicago Blackhawks host the Los Angeles Kings. The Blackhawks are coming off defeating the Detroit Red Wings after trailing in the series 3-1. The Eastern Conference Finals will begin Sunday with the Pittsburgh Penguins hosting the Boston Bruins. In the NBA, the Miami Heat pulled away in the third quarter to defeat the Indiana Pacers 90-79 to take a 3-2 series lead. Game 6 will be Saturday night in Indiana, while the San Antonio Spurs took care of business early, sweeping the Memphis Grizzlies in the Western Conference to advance to the NBA Finals for the 5th time in team history. In the coaching carousel, the Charlotte Bobcats hired former Lakers assistant Steve Clifford to be their next head coach, while the Atlanta Hawks hired former Spurs assistant Mike Budenholzer to be their next head man. In baseball, the Buffalo Bisons are on the road tonight as they take on the Norfolk Tides. First pitch is at 7:05 p.m. This is Aubrey Gibert, and this has been your 3030 Sports Update here on 91.3 FM WBNY.
And now, the Sports Reporters Radio Show on WBNY.
You know, it's really hard to go to the finals to win a championship. And for me personally, I was 21 when I won my first one. And you think it's easy and you're going to go back every year. And 2007, we win our third one in 5 years. And you think it's going to keep coming. And I'm 25 and 6 years goes by. And every year it gets tougher and tougher. Every team wants to beat you. And that's why it makes it even more special to go back after all those years playing at a high level with the same coach, with the same big three. But, you know, changing a couple of pieces. If we go all the way, he'll definitely be my favorite because it gets harder and harder.
That was Tony Parker from the San Antonio Spurs talking about going back to the NBA Finals with a different team. Obviously, he's had the big three, Tim Duncan himself and Manu Ginobili going forward. But it's going to be really interesting to see who they end up facing, whether it's Indiana Pacers, Miami Heat. Currently, Miami Heat on top of the Indiana Pacers 3-2 after a 90-79 victory yesterday. We're going to have ProjectSpurs.com's Michael DeLeon
calling into our show. Last year, we actually had him on our show. It was when the Oklahoma City Thunder beat the San Antonio Spurs 4-2. Spurs had a 2-game lead. He made a bold prediction saying the Spurs were going to win the series, and they ended up losing 4 straight. So hopefully we're not bad luck for the Spurs, and they can win the championship this year.
Yeah. Just so we can go into possible matchups. I don't think Indiana has a chance versus San Antonio personally. I see them as the same team as Memphis virtually. The only big difference I would say is Paul George is better than Tayshaun Prince at the small forward position, but they don't have a point guard really.
You just said Tayshaun Prince.
No, I'm saying because the Memphis Grizzlies had Tayshaun Prince, and then Paul George on Indiana, so that's a big difference there because Tayshaun Prince is not a scorer at this point in his career.
Yeah.
But they don't have a dominant point guard that will hurt San Antonio. The only thing they have is Roy Hibbert down low, and I mean Memphis relies on their front court just as much as Indiana does, and obviously it was to no avail. Zach Randolph was a virtual no-show in the Western Conference Finals.
But there's a difference between Zach Randolph and David West. David West has a jumper, and he can make those shots.
I mean, they're Indiana's a little bit better. Let's put it like that. I will say they're a better team than them, but they're not. They don't have that player that like a LeBron James, where he makes everybody better, and then that can hurt you because really, even if they play Miami, that's really the only mismatch that San Antonio has is LeBron James. But you still even have a Kawhi Leonard, a guy who can at least try to match up with them. You're not going to stop LeBron James.
From getting 40.
The thing if they play Miami is you're not going to beat San Antonio with one guy. You have to play collectively. And that's saying, even look at the Oklahoma City series last year. Oklahoma City, those first 2 games were trying to play hero ball where Harden and Westbrook and Durant were going one-on-one. And then I think really Scott Brooks really preached to them that the only way you could beat the Spurs is by making the extra pass, and that's getting everybody involved. And while LeBron James does do that, get everybody involved, I don't think that he has as much talent as Oklahoma City did when they had Durant, Harden, and Westbrook in terms of guys who can make those perimeter shots when they're open, because Miami hasn't shown they can hit that shot consistently. And if you depend on LeBron James to do it, you're in trouble because then now you're sacrificing everybody else being involved because now he's trying to score. So, because let's be honest, Miami's best when LeBron James is not a scorer and more of a facilitator and only scores 25. If he has to score 30, 35 points, you realize they don't win games because they're relying on him too much. And I think with San Antonio, you're gonna need at least 2 or 3 guys with at least 20 points, I feel like, because how else are you going to beat them? I mean, LeBron James can't drop 40 a night and beat San Antonio. It's just not going to happen. And I would be shell-shocked if he was able to beat them by himself. It would be the same thing. It would be the same thing as when he played them with Cleveland. He'll be by himself. So with a Tim Duncan and a Manu Ginobili and a Tony Parker and Kawhi Leonard and guys like that, you can't beat San Antonio by one player. You have to be involved. Now, if Dwayne Wade was healthy, I would say Miami could beat San Antonio, no doubt about it. I wouldn't even question it. But Chris Bosh or Wade, they're going to not one, both are going to have to step up if they're going to beat San Antonio if they get that far. And we have our caller.
And we're joined now by ProjectSpurs.com's Michael DeLeon. We had him on last year during the Western Conference Finals when the Oklahoma City Thunder beat his San Antonio Spurs 4-2. Obviously, this year has been different with the Spurs sweeping the Memphis Grizzlies in 4 games. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on again. It's good to talk Spurs game and actually be out of the Western Conference Finals for once.
Well, last year when we had you on, obviously the Spurs had a 2-game series. You made the bold prediction that they were going to make the finals, and obviously they ended up losing 4 straight. So hopefully we're not a bad omen for the Spurs.
Yeah.
But what is
I said 7 games this time, and then they made it in 4. So gosh, I'm not looking very good. It's not my pick so far.
But what is different about this year's Spurs team than the one that lost to the Thunder last year?
I'll start at the top, and that's Tim Duncan. He's a completely different player this year. When I was previewing the Memphis Grizzlies series, I was talking about the differences, and the first one was Tim. Back in that series in 2011 against Memphis, he was averaging about 12 points a game, 8 rebounds. Last year he was doing okay, but this year it's been a completely different Tim Duncan all year long, very consistent. And you can just tell that he knows time is coming soon where he's gonna have to hang up those sneakers, and he's got to really put it all out there to try to get that 5th ring. And the whole team is behind him. So Tim Duncan has been the biggest reason, I think. I mean, he's really raised the level of his game to where I hadn't seen him like that in probably 3 years, maybe 4 years. Thiago Splitter helping out in the post as well. They hadn't had that help last year. He wasn't, I think, ready for that. On the perimeter, guarding Durant and Harden and even Westbrook, I don't think Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green were where they are now. They've taken major strides during the off season and this season, and are really considered I think above average defenders now.
Now, obviously the Spurs made it to the Western Conference Finals last year before losing. The difference between the two teams, do you think it's more a strategic change by Greg Popovich, or do you think it's simply because of injuries? I know Ginobili was hurt all of last postseason, and he still is this season, but do you think it's injury, or do you think it's a strategic change?
No, you can't even talk about Pop without even mentioning a strategic change. I'm sure that there's definitely some strategy in that. I mean, if you look at what he did at the beginning of the season, setting the big three and Danny Green home for a game against Miami, and he's been really smart about managing minutes and resting players and making sure that everybody's in top shape. Even Manu hasn't looked great in the playoffs, but when he got injured at the end of the season, he said he probably wouldn't be 100% until the NBA Finals came around. So I really think that that's had a lot to do with it. I mean, obviously you have to take the cards that are given, but then what you can do with that. And Pop's just done really well with managing that and trying to think of some strategy to try to help his team. And I think that's also been the reason some players have been able to step up this year when other players have been out. So it's really helped strengthen the entire roster.
Now, Tony Parker's a guy who's won 3 championships in his career. He made an interesting comment about how this year will be his toughest attempt to win a championship. How do you feel about the matchup between either Miami Heat or the Indiana Pacers?
I know a lot of people are afraid of the Heat, but I actually think the Spurs probably match up better. They've had tough times to get teams that rebound really well and have bigger centers like Roy Hibbert and David West, and going against a team like Miami, I think they can probably be able to stick Kawhi Leonard on LeBron, Danny Green, and Wade, and they wouldn't have too much trouble up front like they have against some of the bigger teams in the past. Indiana's not as experienced, like they have those big guys. That's where some of their weaknesses come in, and obviously they're improved this year. But Roy Hibbert, when he gets going, is the beast, and he'd be tough to stop.
Now, with San Antonio obviously closing out the series so early, I think on Monday night, they've obviously had plenty of rest. I mean, obviously Miami series is not over yet. Do you see the rest hurting the Spurs?
That's always a tough situation. It's like a double-edged sword. It's kind of like you don't know. You want the rest because they're an aging team, and they've played so many games, and Manu's still not really there. Tony Parker's been banged up a lot. Tim Duncan is the same throughout the playoffs, and they need the rest. But at the same time, you don't want them to lose that momentum. They've swept 2 teams so far, and they went 6 with Golden State. So you don't want them to lose that momentum. But I'm sure Pop's got them in the practice facility, going out and making sure that they're focused. So in this case, I think it'll help them because, this other series looks like it could go 7, depending on what Indiana does. But it could go 7, and having that rested team as long as they're still focused, I think that'll play in the Spurs' favor.
Seeing how LeBron James dominated the third quarter of last night's game against the Pacers, how do you think the Spurs would try to defend the Heat?
I really think that Pop will try to throw different defenders on him. I know he'd start with Kawhi Leonard on him, and Kawhi improved on his defense quite a bit this season. And obviously, nobody stops contains LeBron James, but having somebody in front of him, I feel like Indiana's made some bad decisions, especially they need to watch, and Spurs will have to watch on their pick and rolls and their screens not to get switched up. A lot of times, LeBron will end up getting matched up with George Hill or DJ Augustine, and that's like lose-lose. There's no way you're going to come out of that situation on top, and you just got to pay attention, fight over screens, and just different looks. You can't let him, get too comfortable with Kawhi on you. You got the Danny Green on him a little bit. Possibly, I've seen the foot speed's not great. The physicality of Boris Diaw might be something they could look at and try to put him for a little while.
Now, speaking of the Spurs, obviously, Tim Duncan is a major reason why they are where they are right now. It was reported that he lost 25 or 30 pounds in the offseason, and this was, the average points this year. He had 17.8 along with 9.9 rebounds. How much does Duncan have left in the tank, or do you think he has any more past this season, even if they do win the title?
It's kind of that question. It's like, when I talk to the other guys about this, the other writers on Spurs, and like, if he wins, does he retire? But I think it's clear he still has more in the tank. I mean, over the past, 2 seasons, he's taken a really big interest in making sure that he's in top physical shape. He's a lot more aware of the stuff in his body. He's running that hill there in San Antonio in the offseason quite a bit. He brings in other big men. I know he's had Roy Hibbert in, Nene and stuff like that to work out against. And, it's just that thing you want to finish on top if they win. If you want to go out kind of like Theo Robinson did in 2003, or, do you want to stick around. I think from here on, it gets a little harder. Everybody gets another year older, but he's definitely capable of playing another probably 2 years at least.
And an interesting question for you going into the offseason. Manu Ginobili is going to be a free agent. He's currently 35 years old. What do you think the future holds for Ginobili in San Antonio?
He's definitely Spurs for life. There's no question that he's going to be back. He just got to work out, everything. Obviously, you really don't know what he's got left. I mean, this has been a tough year for him, and the injuries have really deteriorated his, abilities on the court. And he's still good on both ends, but you can see that there's something bothering him. He's taking a little longer now to rehab from injuries, so his role may change a little bit. Now, where he's at though, he might not have to change because he's coming off the bench. They've already got Danny Green, who seems to be taking even more steps every year to be a better player and somebody they can really keep starting. Kawhi Leonard is obviously the future of the franchise, so I think his role may diminish a little bit, but he'll probably still stay the backup until his time is done.
And then another person who's going to be gone from this team next year for the San Antonio Spurs is going to be their assistant coach, Mike Budenholzer, who was a top assistant the past 6 years. He's going to become the Atlanta Hawks' new head coach. What are your thoughts on him deciding to go to Atlanta, and do you think the Spurs system can be successful in Atlanta?
Yeah, that's a huge loss. It's a really big loss because, as even Pop said, he said Budenholzer's always been known as the top assistant, but he's been more of like a co-head coach. And, he's been offered a lot of jobs over the past 2 years, and he's turned them down because there's always been that kind of that idea that he would take over for Pop and Pop's done. And even Budenholzer said himself that it would have to be a great situation from the past up for him to leave the Spurs. He's from Atlanta. He's got Danny Ferry there. They've got kind of a Spurs starting over there. And I think he sees it as a challenge to himself to try to, get them past the thing, one series and out type playoff team. I've got a lot of confidence in both him and Barry. I think they'll do good things. Barry was able to do some really smart stuff last year and getting rid of some large contracts. And, I think he was the guy that brought Dan to the Spurs after he was with the Cavs. And so I think that, they're headed in the right direction and he'll be able to do a good job.
Last question to go away from the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, NBA free agency will be big this season. Where do you think Chris Paul and Dwight Howard will land? I know Chris Paul, there's been a report that he's a little angry with the organization. Where do you think the two top guys will end up next season?
I think Dwight Howard's going to go with whoever pays him the most money at this point. He's right now he's obviously not looking for the best situation because he's in a good situation, but he wasn't able to make that happen. So I think it really becomes a money deal for him, and that could be Dallas. I know Mark Cuban's always trying to get a really good top big man, and they can make a run at him. As far as Chris Paul, I think he might just stay in with the Clippers. It just depends on who can take on his contract, and if that team is able to be anywhere close to where he's going to want to be in. The Clippers are, while they lost in the first round, it's going to be hard to find that situation with those players set anywhere else. They've already got a pretty good core. I just need to build on that a little bit more.
All right, and my final question for you is going to be, who wins the series for the Eastern Conference Finals, and then can the San Antonio Spurs beat whoever they're going to face?
It's kind of want to see what happens in this next game here, but I think, Miami really has kind of now a mental advantage over Indiana for the last game. I mean, they just couldn't get anything going, so I think Miami might take it. It might be 7. It'll be really close. It's going to be really close in the finals if they end up when against the Spurs. Spurs are a lot better than I think a lot of people expected, and I like the matchups. Obviously, though, when you have LeBron away in a Bosch, it's tough. But I think also off the bench, even the Spurs are pretty strong as well. It'll probably go to 7 games, and it's kind of a toss-up, really. I mean, obviously, I want to say it's my Spurs homerism, but the Spurs are going to win and sweep them in 4, but it's not going to happen. So it'll be close, but I can't really pick at this point.
All right, thank you, Michael, for coming on our show. Hopefully the bad karma we had last year doesn't result in the same this year.
Yeah, I hope not. Thanks again for having me on. It was good talk.
All right, thank you.
All right.
All right, that was ProjectSpurs.com. Michael DeLeon covers the San Antonio Spurs there. Small market team, but again, a very successful team. Between 2003 2007, they won 3 championships. In 2007, they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, and who was on the team? LeBron James. Once again, LeBron James could end up facing the San Antonio Spurs again in the finals.
It could possibly be the curse of the San Antonio Spurs if he does not beat them.
Nobody can beat them. They're 4-0 so far in the NBA finals.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you want to go off of history, they probably will win the series. My initial reaction, like I told you before, I think San Antonio is going to win the NBA Finals no matter who they face. I can't tell you how many games. I think if Miami wins, they have the home court advantage, I believe, because they had the best record in the league.
Yeah,
and otherwise, if Indiana wins, then San Antonio gets the home court advantage. So I don't think it really matters home court for San Antonio because they're such a great team that they could play on the road. I think the only big challenge they had in these playoffs was versus Golden State because of the fact that Golden State could just shoot you out the gym. I mean, let's be honest, those first 2 games in that series, Klay Thompson and Curry couldn't miss. And
they ended up winning a game in game 1.
Yeah. It just, there's no defense for great jump shots. There's nothing you can do. If the guy just makes a shot in your face, you just pat him on the back and just go down the court. There's nothing you can do about it. And there's really nobody on Miami or Indiana that really can shoot you out the gym. Even LeBron is not a great jump shooter. So I don't see, unless they have Stephen Curry reincarnated in Mario Chalmers, I don't see them beating San Antonio.
Actually, LeBron James actually improved. He actually was 5th in shooting percentage this season.
I think that was due to the fact that he didn't shoot as much.
Or more layups and dunks.
Yeah, and then if you're shooting layup and dunks, obviously your percentage is going to be a little bit higher, which I don't blame him whatsoever. There's no reason why he shouldn't be laying the ball up and dunking at his size and height. I've been pushing for him to do it more. He's been shooting too much from outside on the perimeter. I mean, he can hit that shot, but he can't hit it on a consistent basis. So I think that, if anything, that San Antonio series, he's definitely going to have to post up. Because if he stays out on the perimeter, it allows defenders to be able to stick with him because guys like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, while they're not as quick as LeBron, they can pretty much stay with him tack for tack. But when he goes into the post, though, it's men amongst boys. Nobody can check him down there. Not even like a Tim Duncan. Nobody can. So I think if he's smart, if they get past Indiana first, he needs to get down low every single game because that is where San Antonio will have no answer for him down low, and he can dominate because they're not a big team either.
And the difference between Indiana and San Antonio is San Antonio has depth at the front court, whereas when you look at Indiana, all they have is Roy Hibbert and David West, and maybe Ian Mahinmi comes off the bench, or Sam Young. They're not really guys you're really worried about. So you could basically try to work it inside and try to get them to fall out. Obviously, it hasn't worked to success yet, but they still find ways to win. But when you look at San Antonio, they have Thiago Splitter starting at center, Tim Duncan at power forward. Coming off the bench, there's Matt Bonner, Boris Diaw, Dajuan Blair, who we really haven't seen in a while. He graduated out of Pittsburgh University, and he'll be a free agent this year. But yeah, I just feel like it's a much better matchup for San Antonio going against Miami than it is going against a team like Indiana because obviously Tony Parker, the type of player he is, he likes to slash and go dish it off if he can't get to the lane. And you look at Roy Hibbert and David West, they do a great job of protecting the paint, so he's going to have to try to dish it off. And you've seen players like Paul George and Lance Stevenson do a great job of guarding three-point shooters, so I really feel like the series would really favor them facing Miami instead.
You think so?
Yeah. So it's about matchups more than anything.
And I feel as though while Indiana is bigger down low, they've been bigger than every team. They're going to be bigger than every team they play at this point forward. But it doesn't mean you're going to win. I mean, I feel as though Tim Duncan is going to get his 20 and 10 every game no matter what, who's checking him. I mean, unless Roy Hibbert takes him. But Roy Hibbert, I would not take Parker because if you put Roy Hibbert on Tim Duncan, it pushes him out of the paint because he can hit that 15-foot jump shot. So I think while, Indiana might be better defensively, also I feel as though Indiana is not a team that fast breaks a lot, and they're a team that likes to slow it down, and that plays into the favor of the San Antonio Spurs. Well, actually, they have actually, and that's one big adjustment they had made. They've pushed the ball more this year. I think they were averaging 110 points a game. They're not a team that just slows it down. They like to push the ball, and one thing is they don't turn the ball over, and that's one thing Miami feeds off of. And Tony Parker doesn't turn the ball over. So, and I feel as though Popovich would have a scheme set for Hibbert where he wouldn't be as effective as he is versus Miami, even if it's a double team, if it's throwing different looks at him. I feel as though, like I said before, you can't beat San Antonio with one player. Kevin Durant couldn't even beat them by himself. You need one or two other guys who can take the pressure off of you and really beat them. I mean, because while San Antonio doesn't have as great talent as you, they play collectively, where it's a point where you can't beat them by yourself.
Well, Kevin Durant didn't face San Antonio; he faced Memphis. But I'm
talking about. I'm going last year how
that
he needed James Harden and Russ, and you're going to need that kind of supporting cast to beat them.
And you don't know about the health of Dwayne Wade. And from what I've seen so far from him and Chris Bosh, who might be sporting an injury, I believe, in the shoulder area, that's really going to affect them going forward. So I really feel like San Antonio going against Indiana would be a really interesting matchup that would go 7 games, just because of, as I mentioned, all the great defense that you have going against a great offensive team like San Antonio with their ball movement. It would be an interesting matchup just from that aspect. But going up against Miami, there's some interesting things there. It's going to be a high-scoring game for sure. Both teams can shoot threes. Both teams can establish somewhat of a post game. Chris Bosh, even though he has been playing well, he can still jump. He still is a pretty good jumper, mid-range jumper. So. And Tim Duncan the same. I'm really looking forward to what happens with Tony Parker and how Miami would try to guard him if they had to, because we've seen LeBron James check Derrick Rose in the past. Obviously, they're two different types of point guards. Derrick Rose is more the kind who can shoot. Tony Parker's a guy who's not afraid to drive through the lane and dish it out. So how do you defend it if you're Miami? Because their shooters, Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard, have really hit their shots this year, and also Manu Ginobili.
Yeah, that's one of the issues, and I think also who's going to check Tim Duncan. I think they're going to most likely have to put Udonis Haslem on him, and I think there's going to be at times where LeBron might have to take Tim Duncan, and that's going to take away from his offense with so much, energy on defense. I can't see them really putting LeBron on Tony Parker for the simple fact that he runs off of so many screens and everything like that it would really take away from his other all-around game. They'll probably start off with Mario Chalmers on him, and they might have to put Norris Cole on him probably, because you can't put Dwayne Wade on him with that knee injury running around the court. So it'll be interesting. And then obviously, who's going to check LeBron James? Obviously you can say Kawhi Leonard, but I think it's going to be a collective effort by San Antonio. I don't think it's going to be one guy. But honestly, I feel as though if they do play Miami, I do think that San Antonio will look to make LeBron a scorer, where they're going to just do single coverage and let him go off, and then see. That's not going to be enough. Where if he scores 45, that's not going to be enough to beat them, because then everybody else is not involved.
They can match.
Yeah, so I think honestly they're going to single coverage LeBron if they do play them. I think if they play the Indiana Pacers, I think they're going to look to double team off of Hibbert, or Popovich has something up his sleeve. That man I've never even seen that man worried one day in my life. Has he ever not had a poker face? He has a great poker face. Great poker face.
Well, he has the best interviews too. I mean.
Oh, he has the best interviews. The best one-word interviews ever in the world.
He turns an open-ended question into a closed question. But looking at the Spurs going against Miami or Indiana, I mean, obviously if this series goes 7, it's going to be interesting because of the 10 days rest that the San Antonio Spurs are going to get. I really found it interesting how the NBA decided to handle the series. After Game 1, there's 3 days off before Game 2, and after Game 4, there's 3 days off before Game 5. So Spurs are really going to have a lot of rest in this series. And you mentioned, obviously, Tony Parker with the ankle injury. You have Tim Duncan, who has his knee injuries, and you had Manu Ginobili with his hamstring. This is going to be really crucial for them. Just a matter of, will they be rusty in Game 1? If they go against Miami, they'll be on the road anyway, so you're not really expected to win Game 1. So you never know what can happen. But going up against Indiana, possibly, they really don't have much of a bench, and that's the one key that San Antonio has. They have plenty of depth in their team. They can get scoring from elsewhere, and you look at all the series that Indiana had to play so far. I believe they went 6 games with Atlanta, 6 games with the Knicks. In order to play in the finals, they have to go 7 games with Miami, so they're going to be tired.
Yeah, they're going to be very tired. and then they're gonna have to go right back and go into San Antonio and try to get at least one of those games.
And they don't like to use bench players.
They ride their horses, yeah. Kudos to Frank Vogel. I think he's a great coach. I think he's gotten a lot out of this team where nobody expected it. Obviously, they're still missing Danny Granger too, who's another guy who can get you 20 points a night. I think he's really developed Paul George into, I think, is going to be a superstar in another year or two. But I just think that they're not right. I don't think they're right. I don't think they're there yet, though.
And you think about it, they're going to get Danny Granger back next year.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, usually you would be happy about something like that, but I feel as though it would. I feel as though it's gonna. Somebody's gonna have to sacrifice their game. It's gonna have to be Paul George or Danny Granger because I don't see them both really fitting that great. Like last year, Granger was that main guy, but I feel as though now George is that guy. I don't think you can go back to Granger being the main guy the way George has played this season.
They got to learn how to coexist.
Yeah, they're going to have to learn how to coexist. And that's why you had the offseason to do that.
Well, the most interesting part about the offseason is David West is going to be a free agent.
Yep.
So do you put Danny Granger at power forward, possibly going forward? It'll be interesting to see what they do. But
do you trade him maybe?
I don't know what you can get for him at this point.
Yeah, obviously with that knee, you're not too sure. But I know they were talking about, there's some guys in free agency this offseason. I'm not sure what their money is looking like salary cap wise for Indiana, but I mean, there's Paul Millsap, Al Jefferson. I mean, I wouldn't mind bringing David West back either, but I think the big key for them will be what are you going to do with Danny Granger and how will he coexist with Paul George, who I think is at this point is stepping on the steps of a superstar.
And another guy who we haven't talked about as a superstar, Roy Hibbert. I mean, he's too inconsistent, kind of like J.R. Smith in a way. Obviously, they're two players who play different games, different positions, but they're both inconsistent because one night they can put up 20 points, the next night you don't even know they're on the court. The interesting thing about Roy Hibbert is he actually had a max contract offer from the Portland Trailblazers, but Indiana smartly matched it, and he ended up staying in Indiana, making a lot of money that way. But just quick predictions before we end our show. You have Indiana going up against Miami. I said Game 6 for Miami.
I got Miami in 6. I have them winning tomorrow night.
And then, the next time we're on our show, we're going to have San Antonio facing probably Miami. So if I had to guess, that series is probably going to end up going 6, and I'm going to go with San Antonio winning.
Yeah. People have been bashing me for doing the whole 6 games thing, but
it works.
I like it. I'm gonna go with San Antonio in 6. I see them closing it out on their home court.
Well, they'd be on the road
for Game 6. They'd be home. Yeah,
you're right.
They'd be home, so I see them closing it out. Either way it goes, I can see them closing it out in Miami as well. I don't see Miami losing their last game at home, so I'll go with them in 6 and them winning in San Antonio for Game 6 and winning the NBA championship.
And by the way, just to end our show, we didn't mention baseball at all, but Jacoby Ellsbury had 5 stolen bases yesterday.
Remarkable.
It's crazy.
Great leadoff hitter, great center fielder, as long as he's healthy. But
that'll wrap up our show, the Sports Reporters Radio Show. I'm the host, AJ Speier. We might have a guest next week if Miami makes it to the finals. Last year I had a guest from Miami come on our show. I'm going to try to have him back on. That was Jonathan Zaslow of the Miami Heat Radio Network. If I can, I'm going to try to get him on our show again. So that'll wrap up the show, Sports Reporters Radio Show. I'm the host, AJ Speier, with Aubrey Gibert, signing out.